One of the big problems we are really having in the UK is our economy. No one can really argue the case that it's not a problem, that it's something that any government needs to really take a serious look at and start fixing it. Like, we can't deny that is not a serious problem in the UK. But in order to have a serious economic conversation about the UK's economy, you have to admit, first of all, that Brexit is causing a problem to the UK economy. And the problem we are facing, a big problem we are facing, is that the current government refuses, of course, to admit that Brexit is causing any type of problem, although they will occasionally do, as we saw with them the delaying the food checks for a fifth time. Not surprised, because I said it was coming and it happened. But you still have hardcore believers in Brexit who are, going along with this ideology that if we follow this Brexit path, everything will be good. Everything will be golden. And Rishi Sunak was one of those people. He was, pre to his very meteoric rise. People forget that you could go back just a few years, and before Boris Johnson made Rishi Sunak Chancellor, no one really knew who he was. So remember that he was a hardcore Brexiteer who believed this. And today we're going to go over something very, very interesting, because it seems to me, in this case, that Brexit is closing a lot of businesses in Rishi Sunak's own backyard, and business people in Rishi Sunak's own constituency are not happy. They are not happy at all. And here's the thing: if you want to have a serious conversation about what is going on with your business, is Brexit, playing a part in it, you've got to be able to discuss Brexit, and you've got to have an open and honest conversation about it. And the thing is, most Brexiteers, people who are still obsessed with this Brexit ideology, cannot at all. And that is why, at the moment, particularly with this government, we cannot fix our economy at all. Now, the next Labour government, they said, okay, we're going to make Brexit work. We're going to do alignment deals. But even then, that will not fix the problem 100%. And I've always said, I think Keir Starmer's plan is to go, look, we've fixed Brexit. This is as good as Brexit is ever going to be. Are you sure you still want this? I think that's the plan that they seem to be going with. So, hey, I'm all on board for that. So, but that's a topic for discussion for another time. But we're going to talk about this because this is interesting, because these people who we're talking about today in this article are from Rishi Sunak's constituents, so we say, and they are running businesses that are directly affected by Brexit, and they've been told by Rishi Sunak to their faces that Brexit would be amazing. And the exact opposite is now happening in Richmond. So, before we do that, though, please, as always, do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And, of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the one-notification link, the Buy Me Coffee link, the YouTube thank you button, and, of course, as always, the Pony Club. So, as always, thank you very much to everyone who does help and support the channel that way, even if you do just click the like and share button. So, let's go on into this. So, this title of the article is, Rishi Sunak told me Brexit would be amazing. Now businesses in our town are closing. So, Jo Foster asked her MP, Rishi Sunak, 3 times for help with her business struggling after Brexit. And she's told the politics editor, Ralph Blackburn, that he needs to face up to reality. Not long after the EU referendum, the small business owner Jo Foster went to see her MP, Rishi Sunak. The current Prime Minister was, at the time, a junior minister in local government, in the local government department, having succeeded William Hague in the North Yorkshire seat of Richmond in 2015. The embattered Premier, Theresa May, was on the television talking about the Northern Ireland border. And Joe remembers Sunak half watching whilst working in his constituent's office. She then put her two business cards on the table. One for an innovation innovation company, and another for a wellness firm, and asked, "How do I stop Brexit damaging my two businesses?" Joe then remembers the current Prime Minister rolling his eyes and replying, "What do you do? I am very confident everything is going to be amazing." And yet, bear in mind, when Rishi Sunak came into office, there was a very, very clear sea change from how the government had been viewing Brexit from Boris Johnson and under Liz Truss. A very clear sea change. There has been a lot more compromise. We've seen the Windsor Framework, which was aimed at, trying to smooth the rough edges of the Northern Ireland Protocol that Boris Johnson had hurriedly tried to put into place. That was causing a lot of problems. The Windsor Framework is still by far from perfect, but it's better than at least the Northern Ireland Protocol that they had, but still not ultimately perfect, still causing a lot of problems. And of course, the other aim was to get the DUP back into Stormont, but that also failed as well, as we talked about previously as well, just yesterday as well. He's climbed down on getting rid of EU law from the UK book. He's continuously stopped checks going in. Sunak here has gone against everything the Brexit, especially like the hardcore Brexiteers want to do. And they are very, very upset with him. Very upset with him. As we've also discussed just a couple of weeks ago as well, when this news was first announced. Very upset. So how do they, how does he go from, oh yeah, everything's going to be amazing to now, to having these epic climb down moments over Brexit? And as I said at the beginning of this, you cannot have a serious conversation unless you can admit that Brexit is doing damage. Otherwise, it's like you've got the proverbial elephant in the room, and you're standing there while there's just this, the elephant, swinging its trunk around, the person sitting in front of the elephant going, "What elephant in the room? I don't see what elephant." This meanwhile, he's got the trunk all, swinging all over him, just, examining him. And you're like, "There's an elephant clearly there." No, there isn't. And people are catching on, especially business people. Business people were always going to be the first group of people who would be the biggest, shall we say, the callers out of what was going wrong with Brexit. And we've covered time and time and time again businesses on this channel that are having constant Brexit problems, losing business, closing down, unfortunately, in some places. And it has been a bigger disaster than they've been prepared to really admit. But back to it. So Paul Harrison, the chair of the original Richmond Business and Tourism Association, said, "I think the environment that is being created for business now is the most difficult I have ever known. It's a combination of different things. And yes, Brexit is part of the formula." And I agree with what he's just said there. There is a lot of different things going along on here. Yes, high inflation. Yes, you got the war in Ukraine. Yes, you've got a cost of energy crisis. But you've got to add Brexit into that formula as well. Brexit is doing damage. And, things like the inflation, it's not going to last forever. The war on Ukraine, not going to last forever. But Brexit is going to be lasting until you actually reverse it and undo this damage. So, but he continues, "People don't want to talk about Brexit, and I don't understand why. Even the most straightforward things like the exchange rate anything that has been imported, including food, has been impacted by Brexit. Richmond business owner Joe Foster. There we are. Joe also agrees, saying that businesses are shutting for multiple reasons, one of which is Brexit. All the regulations are coming in, and it's hitting people who weren't even concerned about it. Every single cost has gone up because of Brexit. With my aromatherapy businesses, oils that I used to buy and grow in France, it is so there is an impact on the supply chain side. I've had to put an EU address as well as a UK address on the packaging. So I have someone in Ireland I pay effectively to be my agent. And we've pretty much had to pull the plug on selling our products into the EU due to the extra cost and time. With my service industry firm, I work with clients around the world, so freedom of movement is important. What was the number one reason why we joined? Like the beginnings of the EU in the first place, when it was like the European Economic Area. It was because you had the then current Conservative Prime Minister being heavily lobbied by British firms, by UK firms, going, we need to be part of the European Union. We cannot be out of it. The same thing is happening again. We cannot just ignore the EU as if it just doesn't exist. But this is, even Rishi Sunak and the rest of these Brexiteers are just concerned, are just obsessed with this idea that you can just turn your back on Europe and everything will be fine. You can just completely ignore it. Meanwhile, everyone else is like, but they're our closest market. It doesn't matter that you do a trade deal with Canada or Australia or New Zealand or Mexico, because they're not close to us. You know, the Atlantic Ocean, pretty big ocean. It's still pretty far away. Even further if you want to get to New Zealand or Australia. So the idea you can just turn your back and just ignore like your closest market and just do deals with countries that are much further away. Yeah, it just shows you the ridiculousness of this whole ideology that they are believing in, because it goes back to the whole, you know, we've discussed it before, the whole colonialism, the whole Britain, you know, former empire, how the like, you know, the British Empire used to work. Yeah, it can't ever happen again, but that's what they're obsessed with. But there you go. But this is what is interesting, though. The Prime Minister's Rishi Sunak's own seat of Richmond could be at risk of being taken over by Labour, as polling has suggested. While the CEO of the British Independent Retail Association, Andrew Goldcare, has also said that nearly all independent businesses who trade with Europe have seen profit loss due to Brexit. Since that first meeting, Joe has had 2 more conversations with the Leave-supporting Prime Minister, but both times he has denied Brexit is having a negative impact. To be blunt, I think he's got his head stuck in the sand. The second time Joe spoke to Sunak, he was Chancellor and joined a Zoom call during the COVID pandemic with 6 local independents, who were then members of the Business Association. They all relied on EU imports or exports, but Joe says the government website was sending them round in circles. You may remember we covered this at the time. Because no one knew what was going on. Even the government had no idea what was going on, because no one had a clue what Boris and Frost were even trying to negotiate. You know, they were constantly trying to play catch up or trying to guess what they were talking about or what they're negotiating about with. So you had all that constant trouble, all the money wasted in the big campaigns of, you know, get ready for Brexit, which didn't happen. Time and time again, and businesses wasted thousands of pounds on trying to prepare. But There you go. Anyway, she remembers. He said, if Europe is causing you a problem, you need to go to talk to your European counterparts because they're the ones being difficult. He couldn't give two hoots. No. And that just goes to show you, as we said, you cannot have a serious conversation because Sunak doesn't understand. Oh, if you've got a problem, if Europe's causing you a problem, go talk to your European counterparts because they're the ones causing it. No, they weren't. Specifically at that time, it was us that we were leaving and us, the rules would be changing. The Europeans weren't the ones causing the problem. We were the ones who left. We were the ones who are now a third country. We're the ones who have a different rule set compared to the rest of Europe. So it really just goes to show you how he just doesn't really care. And I will tell you now, those 6 local independents, I would say this. If that Zoom call exists as a recording, and I don't know if it does exist, if that Zoom call exists as a recording, I would love to see it. I would absolutely love to see it. So if there's any of those 6 people who happen to be in that Zoom call and you happen to record it, please do get in contact because I would love to see it. I particularly would love to have a clip of Sunak saying that. That would be good. That would be very, very good. But anyway, we continue. So also, Sunak also responded by saying, Joe and I, as you can probably tell, don't share the same politics. We've all had healthy debates on Brexit in the past, and she was very upset that I supported Brexit. However, I think it was the right thing to do. He again denied that Brexit was the reason that some businesses are struggling at the moment, instead pointing to energy bills and inflation, which he said were now coming down, which of course they didn't. And on Friday again, the government ignored Brexit, the elephant in the room, when it comes to our stagnant economy. On the Today programme, the Treasury Minister, John Glenn, was asked whether he would accept that the impact of Brexit has played a part on our low growth. I keep on saying it in this video. You cannot have a serious conversation about impacts on business, impact on the UK economy, if you cannot admit that Brexit is playing an impact on it. And we've got a government who refuses to do that at the moment. Anyway, Glenn, the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, merely said, we made a decision on Brexit years ago, and I think the country wants us to address the situation we now face. Accused of glossing over Brexit, he responded, the country made a decision, and my job as a government minister is to do anything I can to maximize growth of the economy. Well, you could always go back and say, hey, yeah, actually, Brexit was a bad decision, guys. Maybe we should reverse it. Like, there's nothing wrong with generally doing that. People are allowed to change their minds. We live in a democracy. This whole moment of, like, you know, the 16th of January, June the 26th, 2016, as this sacred moment set in stone of the big Brexit referendum. No, it's not. And remember, there are clips of big Brexiteers from Nigel Farage, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Michael Gove, I think even Boris Johnson may have said it one time or another, John Redwood, all said, once you've done one referendum, you could have a confirmatory referendum or another referendum or even multiple referendums to decide on this issue because it was that big. But once they won the first one, they then realized that they didn't actually want those other referendums to take place because then they realized, well, they might actually lose. As you've seen now, the public opinion on Brexit has drastically changed, with people monumentally regretting their change for Brexit, seeing the actual consequences of what it has done to the economy, what it has done to people's businesses, what it has done even difficulty of traveling. So it will be reversed, I think, a lot quicker than people think. That's for sure. So The problem is that by avoiding answering the question or even facing up to reality, there can be no long-term solution. And Joe agrees. We can't pretend that it never happened, and unless you admit that where you are, at things that are not going to be better. The chairman of the Office of Budget Responsibility, Richard Hughes, has said that the impact of Brexit on the UK economy is the same as the magnitude as the COVID pandemic and the emergency crisis. He has admitted that in the long run, Brexit will reduce our overall output by around 4% compared had we remained in the EU. While Goodcare, the CEO of Bria, said that the new requirements are pretty horrible for a small business to actually navigate. And across the country, businesses are closing their doors due to the combination of increased energy bills, rent, and extra expenses on red tape. And the post-Brexit checks on fresh produce coming from the EU have been delayed again due to the concerns that the extra checks would increase prices and fuel inflation. And Sunak is reportedly close to agreeing a deal to rejoin the Horizon Science funding program, ditching the proposed UK-only Pioneer scheme. And news on that as well. That UK-only Pioneer scheme been open for 2 years. They expected a flood of people to want to come. Do you know how many people have actually applied for this scheme? 3 in 2 years. 3 people in 2 years. That just shows you how bad it was. And still, we were hoping a couple of weeks ago to have news on the Horizon scheme. But it seems Sunak is still dithering about it. Still dithering about it, which is still risking a lot of stuff. But it continues. Ignoring that reality could also affect Sunak politically. As pollsters, the YouGov have found that Brexit regret, currently stands at the highest record on level after the referendum. And according to YouGov, 57% of voters believed that Brexit was a mistake, while just 32% thought Brexit was the correct decision. YouGov also found that the majority of voters, of 51%, now want to rejoin the EU. Jo is already planning her fourth encounter with Sunak about the impact of Brexit on small businesses. He won't be able to avoid me at the hustings. Maybe by then, the Prime Minister will have got his head out of the sand. And Brexit was always going to affect small businesses most. I don't think the only businesses that it really hasn't affected, you've had to be very, very large to be able to absorb potentially even the costs, or to have someone already on staff who deals with logistics to be able to deal with that. I always said, I had a friend at the time, when Brexit happened properly, he went from a single sheet of paper to multiple big stacks, taking about 2 hours, what would normally take less than 5 minutes. So that is, that's a cost to a business. 2 hours to fill out paperwork, and the cost of that paperwork, because believe it or not, that paperwork costs money to actually obtain in the first place. So if you're a small business, and you're working on very small margins, as most small businesses do, these extra costs will affect your business. Add on top of inflation, add, the COVID, etc., all these current other energy crisis, rent crises, you can see the problem that most small businesses having. And Brexit is one of the big inflationary problems, not just causing inflation, it's causing a lot of supply chain problems. So many things. The fact that small businesses now just can't sell into the EU cuts into their profit, where they used to have a very good, they could expand into Europe as they could expand into anywhere else in the UK very easily, because they could just send something as easily as they could, to London as they could to Paris or Berlin, or that's not the case anymore. And we've covered it time and time again of many small businesses. The Harrington Press, a small company built on, book printing. They send a package out to Europe. They're rolling the dice to see whether or not that package will actually go through, whether the customer will actually, once it gets there, accept the charges that their customs might put on it. And then, of course, there's a cost to reclaim that package of those goods. It's just cost after cost after cost. And we warned about this continuously. And yet, people like Sunak and the rest of these Brexiteers just have their heads stuck in the sand and just refuse to admit that there's any problems whatsoever. And this is why, certainly under this government, the economy is not going to get fixed. Sunak can say whatever he wants about trying to deal with inflation or anything like that. Bear in mind, he's not actually doing anything on inflation. Him and Jeremy Hunt are just, sat under a table with the fingers crossed like this, playing, "Please, inflation, please, please, please go down, please go down." It's not. But that's their plan to deal with inflation. They've done nothing, and yet there's all sorts of economists from all different, even conservative economists have done pieces in the Financial Times, the Economist. They've all said, "Hey, Sunak, if you want to lower inflation, these are some of the things you can do." He's even ignoring like conservative economists. So, yeah. But like I say, hopefully we won't have them for too much longer. So, as always, thank you very much for watching, and of course, we'll see you all next time.